I'm Rachel Morgan, 33 years old, and for over a decade, I poured my heart into my family's construction business while my sister traveled the world and dabbled in art. 10 years of missed holidays, forgotten birthdays, and lonely nights at the office, all because I believed in what we were building. But one ordinary Friday, tucked between invoices and contracts, I found a legal document that made my hands shake. It turns out the company I helped grow was never meant to be mine, not even a piece of it. And the person my father gave it to, she'd never once stayed past 4 p.m. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been overlooked by the people you thought you could trust. Growing up in Willow Creek, a small town with one traffic light and a hardware store that doubled as the post office, I never questioned where my life was headed. My dad, Carl Morgan, ran Morgan Construction out of a modest brick building with his name painted across the front in weathered white letters. My earliest memories were built around that office, climbing under his desk, while he made calls pretending to answer the phones, like the receptionist did, sorting nails by size in plastic bins while Dad reviewed floor plans. By the time I was in high school, I knew I wanted to be part of it for real. I didn't want to just visit the office. I wanted to build something with my name on it, just like he had. I studied business in college with a focus on construction management, and when I graduated, I didn't hesitate. No fancy offers, no big city job hunts. I came home that same week and showed up Monday morning ready to work. And I did. I updated our systems, streamlined our scheduling, brought in new clients, and spent more nights than I can count on a pull-out couch in the back room during deadline weeks. My dad kept the title of CEO, but everyone knew who was keeping things running. I didn't complain. Not when I missed my best friend's wedding. Not when I canceled 2 separate vacations after last-minute emergencies. I believed in our work, and I believed in the promise my father made to me 100 different ways over the years that this company would be mine one day. Then there was my sister, Hannah. 2 years older than me, always the artist of the family, always the one with a story to tell. She spent her 20s in Europe painting murals and studying museum collections, sending postcards home from places I could barely pronounce. When she moved back after a breakup, Dad found a role for her creative consultant or something like that. She worked part-time, came in late, took long lunches, and yet Mom was thrilled to have both of us under the same roof again. Sunday dinners returned, laughter at the table. It felt for a little while like the kind of family we used to be. I didn't mind at first. Hannah had good taste. She helped redesign our logo and freshen up the website. I figured we were just different people doing different jobs. But then I started noticing things. Conversations that quieted when I walked into a room. Meetings I wasn't invited to. Mom changing the subject when I talked about expansion plans. Still, I trusted them. Trusted Dad. Trusted that everything I'd sacrificed would pay off. And then that Friday afternoon, looking for an old client file in a drawer that should have been off limits, I found it. A folder labeled Ownership Transfer. I thought maybe it was old paperwork from when my grandfather handed things to Dad. But the date was recent, just a few months ago. That's when I saw it, in black and white. 75% of the company handed over to Hannah. The rest split between my parents. My name was nowhere, not even in the margins. And that's when everything started to shift. I stared at the folder in my hands, not fully grasping what I was looking at. I flipped through the pages again, hoping somehow I'd missed something, that there had been a mistake. But each line confirmed that 75% of Morgan Construction now belonged to Hannah. The rest was split between my parents. My name wasn't mentioned, not once. I didn't hear Eleanor come up behind me until she spoke. "Rachel, you all right?" I turned, still holding the folder. My fingers clenched so tight around the edges the paper had started to crinkle. She looked down and saw the label. Her expression shifted. Not surprised, guilty. "Did you know?" I asked, voice low, almost afraid of the answer. She didn't look me in the eye. "Your father said he'd speak to you when the time was right. It's been 6 months." She opened her mouth to say something else, but I'd already stepped past her. The folder stayed with me. I didn't even grab my laptop. The reports on my desk didn't matter anymore. I don't remember much about the drive home, just that it was still daylight when I left and full dark by the time I pulled into my spot. I didn't turn on a single light when I got in. I sat on my couch folder still in my lap and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. The apartment was quiet. I'd never decorated much. No photos, just clean, simple furniture. The kind of place someone lives in when they spend more time at work than home. And that's what I'd done every single day, every weekend, for 10 straight years. I picked up my phone and called Allison. She answered on the second ring. "Rachel, you okay?" "They gave the company to Hannah," I said. "Months ago." I found the papers in the filing cabinet. There was a long silence on the other end. "Then I'm coming over." She didn't wait for me to answer. When she arrived, I was still on the couch. I hadn't moved. One look at me, and she knew. She sat beside me and pulled me close, and only then did the tears come. 10 years, Allie," I whispered. 10 years, I know. She stayed until I could finally breathe again. We talked. Not about what to do, not yet. Just about what had happened, what it meant. And sometime around midnight, I made a quiet decision. If I didn't own a piece of that business, I wouldn't give another minute of myself to it. If Hannah was the owner now, she could run it. I didn't go in Monday or Tuesday. I took the whole week, which I'd never done, not once in 10 years. That Sunday, I showed up at my parents' house at 6 sharp like always. My mother opened the door and pulled me into a hug. Just in time, she smiled. "Dinner's almost ready." I stepped inside, the familiar smell of pot roast thick in the air. My dad was in his recliner, a stack of papers in his lap. Hannah was setting the table, laughing about something. They all looked up when I walked in, and not one of them looked guilty. "Hey, Rach," Hannah said. "I texted you about the client presentation. Everything's set for Monday." I didn't answer right away. I just nodded and said, "It's fine." Dad folded up his papers. "Good. We've got some news about the Westridge project, exciting stuff." I followed them into the dining room. We sat like we always did. Mom served dinner, and conversation flowed like nothing had changed. Hannah went on about her latest idea for a new ad campaign. My dad nodded along, occasionally adding his thoughts. My mother kept steering the conversation toward safe ground, the neighbor's new puppy, a fundraiser at church. I barely spoke, and no one asked why. After dessert, just as Dad stood up to catch the end of the game, I cleared my throat. "I need to talk to everyone." The room went still. He sat back down slowly. My mother froze with a plate in her hands. Hannah looked from me to the folder I was pulling from my purse. I laid it gently on the table. "When were you going to tell me?" No one answered. Dad's jaw tightened. My mother's hand went to her chest. Hannah looked down. "Where did you find that?" my father finally asked. "Does it matter?" I looked at each of them in turn. 6 months. That's how long you've been hiding this. "We were going to tell you," Mom said softly. "We just couldn't find the right moment." I pulled my hand away when she reached for it. "The right time would have been before you signed it." Dad cleared his throat, slipping into his usual firm tone. "It was a business decision. Hannah brings a new perspective. We needed to prepare for the future, and I don't offer that." After 10 years. "You're too much like me," he said, as if that explained anything. "Too traditional. Things are changing, Rachel. So teach me," I snapped. "If you wanted something different, why didn't you ask Mom try it again? We thought you'd understand. You've always been practical about business." I laughed short and bitter. Practical enough to work myself to the bone. Miss Weddings lose friends for what? So Hannah could step in and take everything I built. Hannah finally spoke. Dad approached me. He said the company needed a new image and that I could help lead that. Don't pretend you didn't know what you were taking. Dad stood, voice rising. That's enough. You still have a job, a good one, a job, I repeated. I've been running that business for years, and now I'm what middle management under my sister. You have experience she needs. We're not a team, Mom, I said. She owns it. I work there. That's the difference. I turned to Hannah. How many hours did you work this week? She hesitated. 20, maybe 25. I haven't slept more than 5 hours in a night since the Anderson bid came in. She looked down. I know how hard you work. I've always admired that. Admired it so much, you let them give you my future. Dad's voice thundered again. We didn't make this decision lightly. I stood up. Then you can live with it. I quit. You can't just quit, he said, voice rising again. We've got deadlines. The Maxwell bid is due Friday. Let Hannah handle it, I said, grabbing my bag. She's the owner now. Mom was crying. Rachel, please. We're family. I paused at the door. Family doesn't do this. And then I left. I didn't sleep much that night. The apartment felt quieter than usual, like the silence had grown thick somehow. I stayed on the couch for hours after I got home, still in the same clothes I'd worn to dinner, staring at nothing in particular. I couldn't bring myself to move. At some point I changed into an old sweatshirt, made some tea I didn't drink, and sat back down. It was past 2 a.m. before I crawled into bed, and even then my mind didn't slow down. The next morning my alarm went off at 5:30 like it always had. My hand reached for the phone on instinct before I remembered I didn't need to get up. There was no project deadline to meet, no calls to return, no staff waiting for direction. I turned off the alarm and lay back down, staring up at the ceiling. I didn't go to the office that day, or the next. I told myself I needed time to think, but the truth was, I didn't know how to start over. My whole life had followed one track, one job, one company, one direction. Without it, I wasn't sure who I was supposed to be. I tried filling the hours with things I'd never had time for. I went for a walk in the park near my building, the one I used to drive past every morning without noticing. I made breakfast and actually sat down to eat it. I visited the library, checked out a novel I hadn't read since college. The little things helped. But by the end of the first week, the stillness began to feel heavy. There were no calls from my parents. No texts from Hannah, just a string of messages from the office. First, from the front desk, something about where to find the Anderson contract. Then from a junior project manager asking if I had the updated budget files. Then one from Carla in accounting sounding increasingly panicked. By Thursday, the messages shifted. Rachel, the Westridge client, is asking for you directly. Hey, the Maxwell bid, where are your notes on that? And then from the office manager, Hannah's been asking around, but no one's sure how you handled client specs. Can you call her? I didn't answer any of them. Late Friday afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was my father. I didn't pick up at first. But when the call came through a second time, I let it ring a few more seconds, then pressed accept. His voice came in sharp, the way it always did when he was under pressure. Rachel Anderson is threatening to pull the contract. I said nothing. He kept going. $12 million. That's what we're looking at losing. He says he won't work with Hannah. Still, I waited. You need to come in Monday, he said. Smooth this over. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking out the window. She owns the company, I said. Let her handle it. He went quiet for a second, then raised his voice. This isn't a joke. This is your legacy. Your grandfather. My legacy. I cut in. You gave that away. Remember, I don't have time for this. If Anderson walks, we lose the entire spring schedule. Westridge is already getting cold feet. I need an answer by morning. Then you'd better get started on that presentation. I hung up and switched my phone to silent. He showed up at my door 20 minutes later. I saw him through the peephole, standing with his tie askew and his coat unbuttoned, looking older than I remembered. For a moment I thought about not answering, but I opened the door. He didn't wait to be invited in. What are you doing? he asked, pacing across my living room like it belonged to him. "You're going to let everything fall apart." I leaned against the doorframe. "Sounds like you've got it under control." He turned to face me, eyes sharp. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said. "I'm just done fixing messes I didn't make. I came to offer a solution." I didn't move. "Chief Operations Officer," he said. "Full autonomy over projects, salary increase, corner office, reporting to Hannah." He hesitated. "Yes." I almost laughed. "So I get to clean everything up. But she still owns the company." "What do you want, Rachel?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. 40% ownership, a seat on the board, and a work-life balance that isn't a death sentence. He shook his head. "That's not reasonable. Hannah has 75%. She can sell me some. Or you and Mom can. I don't care how you figure it out. You can't be serious." "Westfield is," I said. "They've already made me an offer." He blinked. "You wouldn't. I haven't accepted. Yet." He started pacing again, muttering to himself, "If Anderson follows me, how many others will?" He stopped in front of me. "You're really going to walk away?" "I already did." He ran a hand over his face. "I need to talk to your mother. And Hannah, you do that. How long before you give Westfield an answer?" 2 days. I opened the door and waited. He left without another word. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't replay conversations or question what I'd said. I sat at my kitchen table and made a list. Not of tasks or deadlines, but of what I wanted, what I was no longer willing to give away for free. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The morning after my father left, I woke up later than usual. Sunlight had already filled the apartment, casting lines of soft gold across the hardwood floors. I lay still for a while, not thinking, just breathing. It was the first time in years I didn't start the day with a checklist in my head. No urgent deadlines, no client meetings, no half-written estimates waiting on my laptop, just space. I made coffee and sat by the window, sipping slowly as the neighborhood came alive outside. The world kept moving. Somewhere people were headed to work. Somewhere someone was opening a job site. But I stayed right where I was. At 8:30, I picked up the phone and called William Barnes. He'd been my professor back in college, now he ran his own firm, and had been nudging me for years to come work with him. He picked up on the first ring. "Rachel Morgan," he said warmly. "This is a surprise. I think I'm finally ready to talk about that offer." There was a beat of silence. "Don't tell me Carl finally pushed you too far. I think it's more like—" I finally listened. We talked for an hour. I walked him through everything, the ownership transfer, the silence, the fallout. He didn't interrupt much, just asked questions now and then, letting me move through it at my own pace. When I was finished, he exhaled sharply. "They built that company on your back. I didn't say anything. You want my advice? I wouldn't have called if I didn't. Start by documenting everything. Projects you've led, clients you've brought in, systems you built. You don't need to take anything with you, just prove what you've already done. Make it clear what your absence really means." I spent the rest of the morning doing exactly that. I made a list every major account I'd secured, every vendor relationship I'd negotiated, every change I'd made that helped the business grow. I pulled together stats reports, timelines, nothing confidential, just proof. Quiet, factual proof of everything they seemed to forget. And I left things out too. Not to be petty, just careful. There were things I'd carried in my head for years. Client preferences, shortcuts, little details that made projects run smoother. Those weren't in any manual. Those weren't in the files. Those lived with me. By noon, I drafted a resignation email. It was short, professional, and direct. I referenced my accrued vacation time, 6 weeks I'd never taken, and stated I would begin that leave immediately. I included a line that I was not available for any work-related inquiries and set an automatic email reply directing all questions to Hannah. I turned off my work phone and dropped it into a drawer. The quiet that followed was different this time. It wasn't the absence of noise. It was space. I could breathe in it. I spent that afternoon going over my employment contract with my friend Sophia, a lawyer who'd helped a few friends through business transitions. We met at her office downtown, and she read through everything twice before looking up at me. Legally, they didn't break anything. Morally, that's another conversation. What are my options? You could negotiate a severance, or ask for a stake in the company based on your years of service, or you could walk away entirely and start fresh. I didn't answer right away. That last one, she said, scares you more than you want to admit. Back home, I packed a small box. It was late around 9 p.m., and I knew the office would be empty. I still had my key. The hallway lights were dimmed, the building quiet. My footsteps echoed on the tile. I didn't linger. My office looked just like I'd left it. Neat, lived in. A few framed certificates on the wall, a coffee mug with a chipped handle, a small stack of client thank you cards in the drawer. I took what belonged to me, nothing more. Personal items, a few books, a framed picture of me and Allison from college. The family photo from the 25th anniversary celebration caught my eye. The three of us, arms linked, smiling like nothing in the world could shake us. I stared at it for a moment, then flipped it face down in the drawer. I left the keys on Eleanor's desk with a note asking her to send my final paycheck when it was ready. I didn't write anything else. Driving home, the streets were empty. The dashboard clock ticked forward as the headlights traced long shadows along the road. I didn't feel relief exactly, but I didn't feel broken anymore either. The next morning I woke up and didn't touch my phone. I went for a walk. I sat in the park and watched the water. I came home and made lunch in silence. I took a nap without guilt. It took a few days to settle into that rhythm. But I found it. By the end of the week, I'd built a small routine, walks in the morning check-ins with recruiters in the afternoon, quiet dinners alone, or with friends I hadn't seen in months. I joined a yoga class. I started sleeping through the night again. Then the messages started to pick up. Hannah asking where I'd store the updated bid projections. Someone else asking how I usually handled last-minute client requests. Then my father's short-clipped voicemails telling me to call back immediately. Rachel, we need to talk. Anderson's furious. The team's behind. Call me. Rachel, this isn't like you. We have responsibilities to our clients. Rachel, we're worried about you. I listened to every one of them, then deleted them. On day 6, my phone rang again. I recognized the number right away. Rachel said, the voice on the other end deep and familiar. It's Maxwell Anderson. Mr. Anderson, I said. Good to hear from you. I'm calling because I need an honest answer. Are you still managing my project? I'm on extended leave, I said carefully. You should have been assigned someone else. I was. But well, let's just say she doesn't know what you know. I've worked with you for 5 years, Rachel. I trust you. I'm not in a position to take that work on right now. There was a pause. Then he said, if your situation changes, call me directly. I don't care what company you're with. I'll follow the project manager I trust, not the logo on the paperwork. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. His words stayed with me not because of what they meant for the company, but because for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to imagine something different. Not a return, not revenge, just a future that had nothing to do with what I used to be. I hadn't planned to answer my father's call, but something about the way the phone kept buzzing over and over made me pick it up. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I just wanted to hear how bad things had gotten. Rachel, he said as soon as I answered, his voice strained. Anderson's threatening to cancel the contract. I didn't say anything. That's $12 million, Rachel. He won't deal with Hannah. He wants you. I leaned against the counter and looked out the kitchen window. You'll need to figure it out, I said. She owns the company. Let her run it. Don't be petty. You gave it to her, I said. I've stepped away. This is your mess now. We have other clients watching. We lose Anderson. We lose everything tied to that timeline. Westridge is already wavering. You have until Wednesday, I said. I suggest you make the most of it. Wednesday for what? To decide how much my experience is worth. Then I ended the call. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I didn't need to check the peephole. I already knew it was him. When I opened the door, he didn't say a word, just walked right in, pacing the living room like it belonged to him. His coat was half-buttoned hair, a little out of place, like he'd left the house in a rush. You're going to let your family's company fall apart. I closed the door behind him. It's not my company, I said. Remember, he stopped pacing. I made a mistake, he said finally. You were never meant to leave. You didn't think giving Hannah 75% would push me out. She had ideas, he said. And you were reliable. We needed that. Reliable doesn't mean invisible. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, I want to offer you something. A solution. I waited. Chief Operations Officer, full autonomy, double the salary, corner office. I almost laughed. You want me to clean up the mess and report to my sister? You'd have control over your division. I don't want control over a division. I want ownership. He stared at me. 40%, a seat on the board, normal working hours, real vacation time. You're asking for too much. Hannah has 75. You and Mom have the rest. Work it out. He sat down, rubbing his hands together. You know this would destroy the business. No, I said, losing the one person who held everything together that already happened. He looked at me for a long time, then stood. I need to talk to your mother. And Hannah, you've got 2 days. That night I didn't pace, I didn't cry. I made tea. I wrote out my terms clearly. No emotion, no room for confusion. I called Garrett Westfield the next morning and asked to meet for coffee. We sat outside a small cafe near his downtown office. I've admired your work for years, he said, setting a folder between us. I think you'd be a strong fit. He slid the offer across the table. It was generous, more than I expected. Profit sharing, 4 weeks of vacation, a clear path to partnership. I'll need a day or two, I said. Of course, he smiled. Take what you need. That evening, my mother showed up at my door with a casserole. I let her in. She placed the dish on the counter and turned toward me, nervous. Your father's been a wreck, she said. He's not sleeping. He's not eating. He's worried about the business, I said, not about me. She looked down. I told him not to keep it from you. I told him it was wrong. Why didn't you say anything when you found out? Because he said it would be temporary, she said quietly. That he just needed time. And Hannah? She didn't ask for the company, she said. He convinced her it was for the best. I nodded. My offer stands. 40%. A board seat. Boundaries. He's talking to Harold now, she said, trying to figure out how to structure it. After she left, I stayed up reading over the Westfield proposal again. The numbers, the benefits, the clarity. But what I kept coming back to wasn't the money, it was how they'd already made room for me before I'd even signed on. No begging, no compromise, just recognition. By Wednesday afternoon the call came. We'd like to meet, my father said. Tomorrow, noon, Riverfront Restaurant. Your mother, Hannah, myself, and Harold, I confirmed. Then hung up. That night I didn't rehearse a speech. I reviewed the numbers. I checked my notes. I wrote down what I would and wouldn't accept. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't feel exhausted. I felt ready. Thursday morning, I wore the navy suit I'd saved for major client meetings. Pulled my hair back. No extra makeup. Just the version of me that had always closed the deals. I arrived at the restaurant exactly on time. They were already seated. Hannah stood when I walked in. My mother gave me a tight smile. My father nodded. Harold had a portfolio open in front of him. Before we begin, Hannah said I want to say something. I sat down. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know how much you'd been promised. Dad didn't tell me until it was done." She looked me in the eye. "I've been trying to manage everything, but it's too much. I don't know what I'm doing." I stayed quiet. "She means it," my mother added. "We all do." Harold spoke next. "We've drafted a few options, but first let's talk through your terms." For the next hour, we did. There was some back and forth. My father offered 25%. I said no. Hannah surprised us all when she spoke again. "She can take it from my share," she said. "I never wanted to be the majority owner. I just wanted to be part of it." That changed everything. By the time we finished, we had the beginnings of a deal. I'd take 35%. Hannah would keep 40. My parents would hold the remaining 25. All major decisions would require board approval, and no executive would work more than 45 hours a week without written consent. Vacation was mandatory. When I stood to leave, my father asked quietly, "Will you come back tomorrow?" "Not yet," I said. "I need to wrap up another conversation first." His face tightened. "I have 5 more weeks of vacation on file," I reminded him. "I plan to take it." As I walked to my car, I thought about how far I'd come in just 2 weeks, about what it meant to finally draw the line. Not in anger, not in spite, just clarity. I spent the evening after our meeting alone on the balcony, watching the lights come on across the neighborhood. A light breeze moved through the trees below. I hadn't accepted the agreement yet, not officially, but for the first time it felt like things might actually change. The next morning, I called Garrett Westfield. He picked up right away. "Rachel, he said I was hoping to hear from you. I wanted to thank you," I said. "The offer means a lot, but I'm going to stay with the company. Some things have shifted." There was a pause. "I'm disappointed," he said honestly, "but I get it. Family business has a pull even when it shouldn't. If things change, the door stays open." I appreciate that. After we hung up, I sat quietly with that decision for a while. It hadn't been easy. Garrett's offer was solid, clean fare, no baggage attached. But there was something about finishing what I'd started. Not for them, for me. That Monday, I didn't go back to work. Instead, I booked a 10-day trip to a quiet beach resort in South Carolina. I packed light, just some paperbacks, a notebook, sunscreen, and one good pair of sandals. It was the first time in my adult life I'd ever taken a real vacation. No laptop, no emergency phone, no checking email in the hotel lobby after dinner. I swam every day, ate slowly, walked on the beach at sunrise and again after sunset, slept in without guilt. On day 7, I sat on the porch of my rental cottage looking out at the ocean and made a list, not of tasks, of what I wanted life to look like when I got back. When I returned, I called Sophia and asked if she knew a career counselor. She gave me a name. I met with her once a week for the rest of my leave, working through what boundaries actually looked like, what balance felt like, how to build a role instead of fitting into one. Back at Morgan Construction, things were changing too. I hadn't been in the building for a month when I finally walked through the front door again. It was a Thursday morning, early enough that the hallway light still felt dim. The front desk receptionist smiled when she saw me. "Good morning, Rachel." I nodded. "Good to be back." My new office wasn't the corner space my father had offered weeks ago. That one still felt too much like his. Instead, I'd chosen a room with wide windows on the second floor, tucked away but bright. I brought in a small table with 4 chairs, a few plants, and a whiteboard. The desk was smaller than my old one, on purpose. My first meeting that morning was with Hannah. She knocked on the door but didn't wait for me to invite her in. Maxwell Anderson, she said, dropping into the chair across from me. He still doesn't like me. I looked up from my notes. I'll walk him through the structure. He needs to know someone's steering the ship. She exhaled. Thanks. She looked different too, a little more composed. Her clothes were still colorful, but more tailored. She still wore one of her scarves, but it looked deliberate now, not accidental. And the Westridge expansion. Her face brightened. They approved the full plan. Said our redesigns were a step above what they'd seen from competitors. You did well with that one. She shrugged, but she smiled. Later that afternoon, Eleanor stopped by. She leaned on the doorframe with a small folder tucked under one arm. The place feels different, she said. How so? Less frantic. Like someone opened a window. She paused, then added, You and Hannah, you're balancing each other out. I nodded. We're trying. Dad hadn't been in the office much lately. He came in once or twice a week now, mostly for mentoring sessions with junior staff. We'd set up a transition plan 3 years to full retirement with clear benchmarks. He didn't argue with the outline, not once. At 6 o'clock, I shut my laptop and stood up. It felt strange at first, walking out of the building while the sun was still up. But I'd promised myself and everyone else that those 80-hour weeks were over. That evening, I had dinner plans. I changed into jeans and a soft blouse, then drove to a small bistro just outside of town. Nathan Rivera was already waiting at a table on the patio. We'd known each other for years. He was an engineer who'd worked on the Anderson account back when I first took it over. We'd always gotten along, but I'd never made the time for anything more. Now I had time. You look relaxed, he said when I sat down. Don't get used to it. I smiled. The board meeting's next week. You ready? I think so. We talked about work for a bit, then about anything else. His nieces, my vacation, a new coffee shop that opened on Main Street. The kind of quiet conversation that had never fit into my old life. When the check came, he looked over at me. You know, he said, I've worked with both you and your dad. The company feels more grounded now, like it's catching up to its potential. I didn't say anything, but I didn't look away. That Sunday, my phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. Mom wants to start family dinners again. She's calling it healing time. You in? I didn't answer right away. Later that afternoon, I drove out to my parents' house. Hannah opened the door. No fanfare, just a nod and a small smile. Dinner was quieter than it used to be. My father said little. My mother watched us like we might crack but didn't push. When the meal was over, I helped with dishes while Hannah wiped down the counters. As I stood at the sink, my father approached me. He cleared his throat. The board presentation last week. You and your sister were sharp. Better than anything I could have put together. I glanced over at him. We make a good team, I said. He gave a single nod. You do? Then he walked away. It wasn't an apology. But it didn't need to be. That following week, Hannah and I presented our 5-year plan to the board. A true split. Her voice on market growth and branding. Mine on process staffing and project flow. We fielded questions together, rebalanced each other in real time. For the first time, I felt seen, not just useful. Afterward, we stood in my office, glasses of champagne in hand. To losing the company, she said. I raised an eyebrow. If Dad hadn't handed it to me, she explained we'd still be in the same roles. You burning out, me pretending to care about spreadsheets. Maybe it took a terrible idea to lead to a better one. I nodded once, then raised my glass. To finding something better. I didn't expect the board meeting to ripple so far. 2 days after we presented the 5-year plan, an email landed in my inbox from Maxwell Anderson himself. He wanted a one-on-one call, not with Hannah, not with the board, just me. We set it up for Friday morning. He joined right on time camera, on sleeves rolled up, no assistant in sight. Rachel, he said, nodding. I've got to say that was one of the tightest strategy briefs I've seen in 10 years. Your presentation cut through everything. Thank you, I said. He paused, then leaned back. You know what impresses me most? It wasn't about flash. It was structure, timelines, risk assessments that made sense. That's what keeps projects on track. I try to keep things grounded. Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Because if the rest of your team moves like that, we've got real confidence. He tapped his fingers on the desk. I've spoken with my partners. We're green-lighting the full contract extension, and we'd like you leading our East Division rollout. That gave me pause. That scope goes beyond what we initially discussed. Exactly. This isn't just a vendor partnership anymore. It's long-term integration. We want someone steady. You've proven yourself. I nodded slowly. We'll need to work out resourcing, and I'll need full discretion on who's assigned. Done, he said. When we ended the call, I sat still for a moment. This wasn't just a win for me, it was a signal to everyone else who'd ever doubted me in that building. Anderson was our highest profile client, and he'd just made it clear who he trusted most. Later that week, Harold, the firm's legal consultant, stopped by my office. Got a minute, he asked, holding a manila folder. Sure. He sat down and opened it. This is the finalized equity agreement. It's been reviewed, signed, and filed. He slid a copy toward me, my name printed clearly, Rachel Morgan, 35% equity holder, executive board member, joint decision authority with full voting rights. I ran my hand across the paper. We also set up quarterly governance reviews, he added. Built-in protections. No one can change terms without board consensus. I nodded. That was important. And for what it's worth, he said, in 30 years of doing this, I've never seen a shift like this handled so cleanly. You didn't just hold the company together. You reshaped it. He stood. I'll let you enjoy that. The next day, I passed Eleanor in the hallway. You're glowing, she said. It's been a good week. She grinned. It's been a good month. Later that afternoon, I sat down with Hannah in our shared office space. She'd been working on a rebranding pitch and had mock-ups spread across the table. I think we dropped the old tagline, she said, pointing. It's outdated, doesn't reflect where we're heading. What are you thinking instead? She turned the screen toward me. Building forward, together. I read it twice. It fits, I said. She smiled. That's what I thought, too. We submitted it to the board that evening. Unanimous approval came the next day. That weekend, I stopped by my parents' house again, this time unannounced. My mother was in the garden trimming the hydrangeas. Come to help, she asked, not looking up. Maybe I said. She handed me the clippers. We worked in silence for a few minutes. He's proud of you, she said suddenly. Is that what he said? No, but I know when he is. I didn't respond right away. I don't need him to say it. I finally said, but I needed him to see it. She nodded. Inside the house, my father was sitting in his study reading. He looked up as I walked past the doorway. You've made the company better, he said quietly. Smarter, stronger. I stopped. That wasn't easy for me to admit. It doesn't have to be, I said. It just has to be true. He closed the book in his lap. Do you ever regret coming back? He asked. No, I said. Not anymore. I left after sunset, driving home with the windows cracked, the air just warm enough to hint at spring. On Monday, I led my first executive planning retreat. Just 6 of us in a rented cabin upstate, no screens, no phones, just real planning strategy and honest conversation. At the end of the weekend, one of our younger managers pulled me aside. I hope this doesn't sound odd, she said, but it's the first time I felt like this place might actually be built for people like me. It stopped me. I didn't need to ask what she meant. I just nodded. Then we're doing it right. By the end of that month, we'd secured 2 more major contracts and begun restructuring our internal mentorship program. We were promoting from within, listening more, burning out less. Justice didn't come all at once. It came in pieces, steady, firm, undeniable. Every project I led, every vote I cast, every young employee who looked at me and saw possibility instead of permission. I didn't have to fight for a seat at the table anymore. I owned part of the table, and I wasn't giving it up again. That spring, the office looked different, not just on paper, but in spirit. People smiled more, meetings ran on time, younger staff spoke up without glancing over their shoulders first. The old tension that used to hang in the hallways like fog had lifted. Hannah and I didn't agree on everything. We still had different rhythms, different instincts. But we balanced each other in ways that mattered. She kept things lively, I kept them moving. And over time, we stopped looking for approval from anyone else. We built something that worked not just for us, but for the people counting on us. Dad didn't disappear, but he stepped back. He took up woodworking, started attending a weekly breakfast group with other retired contractors. And every now and then I'd see a note in his handwriting left on a project brief or financial summary, just a line or two. No corrections, just observations. He never apologized for how things began, but in small, steady ways he showed that he saw me now, not as an assistant, not as a backup plan, but as someone who had become more than he expected. And maybe that was enough. As for me, I stopped working weekends. I started gardening, bought a bicycle. Sometimes I'd find myself laughing just out loud for no reason, and it would take a second to remember what it felt like to breathe without bracing. Hannah and I even started hosting team dinners at our place once a month. No pitches, no spreadsheets, just people, talking, eating, being human. It wasn't a story of revenge. It never really was. It was a story of return, of remembering who I was before I was told what I should be, of standing still long enough to see the whole picture, not just the frame someone else built. And I know now that justice doesn't always show up with a loud bang or a courtroom scene. Sometimes it looks like staying, building, choosing the harder path, the one where you don't just reclaim your seat, but redesign the table entirely. So, if you've ever been overlooked, if someone's ever handed your future to someone else like it was theirs to give, just know this: you are not forgotten, you are not behind, and you are not too late. Your voice still matters, your time still counts. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me, have you ever had to rebuild your place in a family, a company, or even in your own heart? And if this story spoke to you, stay a while. There's more ahead.